Bring home the beef this October at the new Lloydminster Nissan. Finance any new vehicle with the new Lloydminster Nissan, and you'll get a quarter of beef at Diamond 7 Meats for free. Selection is at its best at the new Lloydminster Nissan with an amazing lineup of cars, trucks, and SUVs, like the incredible Nissan Pathfinder and very popular Nissan Rogue. Finance a new Nissan Frontier and fill your freezer this winter. Bring home a new Nissan and bring home the beef only at the new Lloydminster Nissan. Now on Highway 17 South. The new Lloydminster Nissan. We won't sell you a car, we'll help you buy one.
Local people. Local news and events. Local sports. Local matters. For all things Lloydminster and area, this is Live with Kurt Price.
Well, happy Halloween. Welcome to the new Lloydminster Nissan, now located on Highway 17 South. And it is the final day of October, which means it's your last chance to finance a new vehicle with the new Lloydminster Nissan and get a free quarter of beef from Diamond 7 Meats. Plus, we can feel that chill creeping in, lots of frost and a little bit of snow this morning. So if you want to get winter ready with your vehicle, visit our service department. Get 25% off wheel alignments, 15% off battery maintainers, and also cabin heaters. And we'll get a winter inspection deal right now. Get a block heater and coolant test for just $19.99. Well, Tanner Hnidey is here. We're also going to be joined by Darrell Dunn and David Lopez. They're all here today as they look to join, or in David's case, rejoin City Council. Superior Water specializes in nothing but water, and with over 22 years in the business, they're proud and confident that their water and their service is superior. For iron filters, water softeners, reverse osmosis distillers, chlorine removal, and H2S odor removal, give Superior Water a call, 780-875-6636, or stop in and see them at their 57th Avenue location right beside Sheepskin Loft, and stay hydrated with pure, clean water. I drink Superior Water because I like the taste, and it is Superior Water. Well, Lloydminster really did a great job of Halloween this year with lots of options for the kids and for adults as well. And if you're still into that spooky stuff tonight and you don't have any kids to take trick-or-treating, well, there's a few things that you can take part in still. You can head out to the east side of Turtle Lake tonight if you want to take a drive or you're in that area. The Trick-or-Treat Haunted House is on the east side of Turtle Lake, and that's brought to you by New Cart Contracting, and they just asked that you bring a donation for the local food banks, and that runs not only tonight, but through November the 3rd. There's also a Halloween light show nightly at 3106 55th Avenue. You can check that light show out while you listen to 99.5 FM. And they're also collecting non-perishable food items for the Salvation Army at that house. And the Border City Farmers Market is a trick-or-treat market today from 12 to 5 at the Service Sports Center, where you can trick-or-treat through the vendors. And don't forget, the Saturday markets are back now, and they run 11 to 5 with Tupperware, crafts, woodworking, and baking, and more. Now, speaking of baking, we'd like to congratulate Miranda Hopko on being this week's recipient of Cupcakes for Caregivers. Miranda works at the Lloydminster Hospital and was nominated by her mom for not only the great work that she does at the hospital, but also for helping her when she had hip surgery herself. And Miranda works in surgery and in maternity, and as her coworkers told us, she works her butt off. So congratulations, Miranda. Hope you enjoyed the cupcakes. And Cupcakes for Caregivers is proudly brought to you by the Lloydminster District United Way, Sobeys Lloydminster, as well as Live with Kurt Price. Well, this time of year when, of course, we show appreciation for our Canadian soldiers by wearing a poppy. And if you feel as strongly about our country's sacrifice in World War I and World War II, you may want to join myself and Heather Clagis Price on our trip to Europe this spring. At the end of May and into June, we're going to spend about 2 weeks seeing war memorials, battlefields, museums, and we're going to visit a concentration camp. We're going to start in Amsterdam, where Canadian soldiers brought an end to nearly 5 years of German occupation, and we're going to travel through the Netherlands, Brussels, and France, and we'll be on Juno Beach on June the 6th. We'll also see Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, Dunkirk, and more. And we'll finish our journey together in Paris. Go to lamberttravel.ca today to see the entire trip, and if you have questions, you can call 780-875-4414. Well, we're going to get right into it with Mr. Tanner Hnidey here. Thanks for taking some time to join us here on the show, Tanner.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. We're going to start by getting to know you a little bit.
Sure.
Can you tell us about yourself and why you decided to run for City Council?
You bet. Well, my name is Tanner Hnidey, like you mentioned, and I'm born and raised here in Lloydminster in the surrounding area. I know a lot of people might know my father, Lauren. He taught at the Comp. And yeah, it was a pleasure to grow up here in town. I have to say, it's so fun to be on your show because every morning we drive into town. You know, we lived a few miles west, and you could always tell if we were late for school or not based on whether or not we heard the birthdays on 95.9. Because if we heard the birthdays, you know, as we got onto the highway, we were late. You know, if you heard it when you were in town, you knew that you were on time. Hey, that's stuck in my mind. Anyway, grew up here. You know, born and raised here. And then I went to school at University of Calgary, got my degree in my bachelor's in economics. But I graduated right as the lockdowns were in full effect. And so, of course, it meant jobs were so scarce. And so I quite happily actually came back home. I missed Lloyd a lot. I'd come home every weekend to see mom and dad and so on. I came back and I actually hauled grain for a bit, you know, just as a side job. I drove truck. And as I was doing that, I started a few social media pages. And what I would do is, I still do it now, I would take what I had learned in economics and I would see or would take what was happening in the world, you know, on that particular day, because it was unprecedented. And I would apply that knowledge I had learned from econ to try and explain what was happening in the world and why. And that, you know, those pages grew, it was great. And as a consequence, a think tank or two contacted me here in Alberta asking if I wanted to do some economic work for them. And so I happily accepted and did that. And I started my own company. It's just called Hnidey Incorporated, in which I now travel around the province and have been doing so here for the last year or year and a half. And I'll speak at town halls and events to MPs and MLAs and city councillors and, you know, everyday folk talking about economic issues facing the nation. Now, at these events, at the end of them particularly, I always talk about how important it is to become politically active, to become active in the political process. You know, a lot of people are concerned about what's happening. A lot of people are upset with what's happening and so on. And so we say, if we want to change the course of what's happening, then we have an obligation to be involved in politics. And so I thought it best to take my own advice and put my name forward. It's been a privilege to run thus far. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, let's get into some serious questions.
Sure.
We're going to start with the economic growth question. How can council foster economic growth? Where do you see areas of success?
Yeah.
And what would you do to attract more diverse businesses to our community?
Sure. Well, I was reading a paper by the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. And this paper in particular was talking about tax burdens and tax rates and the difference between residential taxes and business taxes. If you want to attract business to a community, then you have to incentivize that business to come here, obviously. And so the question is, what is the incentive? You know, what is the incentive that encourages business to come to your particular community? Now, there's more than one, right? But the incentives that I'm concerned about for this campaign, one is a family-friendly atmosphere, right? The focus of my campaign is family first. I think we have to champion the family, foster Lloydminster to be a place where the family is allowed to flourish, where it's allowed to grow and thrive and so on. And that, of course, encourages entrepreneurs and workers and businesses to come here and, because they're made of people, raise a family. But secondly, you know, talking more about the true economics, one of the strongest drivers for economic innovation and economic growth is tax cuts. That is an incentive for business to come to our community. If we can keep business tax low, then we tell, you know, as council or the community tells business that we're serious about trying to create, you know, a pro-economic atmosphere in this community. So I read this paper, this, you know, independent business paper, and it examined a variety of cities just in Alberta, but, you know, it was still a good study, from Calgary, Lloydminster, Cochrane, Canmore, and so on. And what they looked at in particular was, one, what percentage of tax does business pay compared to residential areas or residential tax? What I mean to say is, does business pay a 1-to-1 ratio of tax compared to residential taxes, or is it different? So here in Lloydminster, business pays almost double the tax, double the property tax compared to residents. And that's about in the middle of the pack compared to other cities across the province. You know, Calgary's quite high, Leduc is the lowest, right? They're almost at a 1-to-1 ratio. More than that, that paper also examined what percentage of a city's budget is financed by business tax and what percentage of it is financed by residential tax. Now, here in Lloydminster, actually, we have the largest, you know, as far as all other cities are concerned, Lloydminster's budget is financed in largest part by business tax. 34% of our budget's financed by business, and the rest, 60-some%, is by residential areas. Now, as far as the ratio is concerned, that's actually the highest in the province compared to other cities. And so it means that, you know, businesses themselves are critical here in this city. Obviously, right? We need it not only for innovation, but also to fund what the city is doing. So then the results of that study said the closer you can get to a 1-to-1 ratio, right, of business tax compared to property tax, the more incentive a business has to come to the community. And I think that's quite right. You know, if you have a business tax, which is 5 times the rate of what residential tax is, it isn't very incentivizing for business to come here. It costs so much money. But if you can get that closer to 1-to-1, then not only does it economically tell businesses to come to Lloydminster and, you know, diversify, it also acts as a signal, you know, to businesses around the province and country that, hey, this council is serious about trying to promote business in the community, and so, you know, you should move here and encourage innovation. Now, as for, you know, success rates with the council, I think it is good that they're in the middle of the pack. Good for them for not being as high as Calgary as far as the tax inequality is concerned. But we can do better, and so why not do better? You know, why not be the best in the province? Why not make this city the most economically encouraging area in which business is allowed to flourish?
So lowering taxes for business would definitely be on the agenda.
Absolutely. And of course, residential too, but you know, as far as business is concerned, yes, lower taxes. Yeah.
Homelessness is listed as the biggest concern by many residents in Lloydminster.
Yeah.
We heard directly from Colleen Young when she was campaigning that she heard that on doorsteps.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're hearing it too. So what recommendations would you make to help solve the homelessness issue?
Yeah. So I went to an event, it was a good event at Town Hall, concerned citizens talking about the homeless issue. And then after that, I actually sat down for coffee. I had a coffee with one of the men's shelter's board members. Because, of course, you know, you want to hear both sides. And after hearing the concerns of residents, which I think are quite legitimate with, you know, threats and crime and so on, I asked this individual who's on the board of the men's shelter, what would you do? You know, if you had complete control over the issue in Lloydminster, how would you solve it best? You know, you see it every day and so on. And he gave me a couple recommendations, which I thought, you know, made quite a bit of sense. First, he said, crime is almost a separate issue entirely. He and the board is in full agreement that if you have individuals, right, homeless or not, who are threats of violence, committing active crimes, they should be they should be taken to the court for that. They should go to prison for that, and rightfully so. If you commit a crime, there are consequences for that, or there need to be consequences for that. Secondly, he goes, I would look into a bylaw, you know, and look at the legality of passing a bylaw that says you cannot, you know, sleep on the street or be on the street after a certain time. And if you are, you'll be picked up by the police and taken either to the men's shelter, or if you refuse to go to the men's shelter, then elsewhere. You know, he says, because that in large part would solve the issues of danger and so on at night. I think that makes sense too. I would be very much in favor of looking into the legality of that. Next, he said, I would always have, you know, a couple police officers at least patrolling downtown, walking downtown as often as we can. One of the past RCMP was the inspector, Suki. I don't know his name. I wasn't old enough to remember him. Apparently,
Nash.
yes, that's the one. Yeah. Proposed that as well. He thought it was a great idea too. And so this gentleman said that would be a wonderful thing. It would certainly make downtown more safe than what it is right now. And finally, I asked him, is it true that other municipalities bus a homeless population into Lloydminster to come here? And he says it is true. He said that does happen. Personally, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's conducive to other cities to pass off this tragic issue to one particular city. I don't think that's right. And so I think we ought to tackle that as well. So these are just a few ideas. The core principle is you cannot commit crime. It's not and be free to do so. That isn't right. You know, if you do something wrong, regardless of all other factors, age, or not, well, you know, race and gender and condition and so on, there ought to be consequences for that. And, you know, we can take these proactive steps to make the city safer.
I find it interesting you say a board member would say there's people getting bussed in.
Yes.
When we've talked to Kagan directly,
right.
We've talked to Becky Shilley, we've talked to the mayor, we've talked to RCMP Commander Brian Nickel.
Sure.
And they've all said no.
Right.
It's not true.
So we have then we have two separate stories from
from a board member,
from credible sources, yes, and
both working for the men's
shelter. So then let's get to the bottom of it and see what's true, because, you know, I wouldn't have reason to doubt this board member's the veracity of his claims, but same with Kagan and so on. And so, why not take a look into it? Yeah.
You mentioned crime.
Yes.
And it's not only the homeless that are
No.
committing crime. We had, again, Brian Nicolani stressed that. But it is a concern for all residents right across Alberta and right across Saskatchewan. So what recommendations would you make when it comes to developing and maintaining a safe and viable community for everyone?
Yeah. Well, obviously, as far as crime is concerned, that's federal and partially provincial jurisdiction. I am convinced that the justice system in the country is broken. It's not working as well as it should. It isn't as just as it ought to be. And so council has an obligation then to, I believe, make a fuss about it. You know, when we talk in these events, people ask, how can we make the most change in society, you know, and with our governments and so on? And the answer, honestly, is to be a pain, you know, like in a good way. You have to be relentless in your emails and public outcry and communication to your elected officials. And I think that's how you make change. And I think that's true at a governmental level as well. As council, I think we ought to be as vocal as possible about the problems of crime going excused. You know, we talk to a lot of people saying it's at a point now where they don't call the RCMP anymore when a crime is committed because they've been told, or they believe at least, that nothing's really going to change and nothing's going to happen. That's a problem. That isn't right, you know? And so it's council's mandate, I'm convinced of this, to, be a loud voice, a loud cry, not just, here in Lloydminster, but actually across the province and country to say this isn't working, something isn't right. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about, hiring more RCMP officers and so on, but I was reading David Lopez's article, or he was asked questions on My Lloydminster now, and he said, we're struggling to fill the positions already. And so, while it's true we have to support the RCMP, absolutely, and all manner of officials who are charged with enforcing the law, yes, absolutely. I think there is a deeper foundational issue with the justice system itself that has to be brought to light.
Well, healthcare is a provincial responsibility. What role do you see council playing in order to ensure residents are getting the best care possible as close to home as possible?
Yeah, the same, right? Of course, like you said, healthcare is a provincial responsibility, but it's up to council to bring those concerns forward to the provincial governments. And of course, we're in a unique position because of our dual provincial or bi-provincial situation. But nevertheless, right, we have an aging hospital. What we want is another one which is efficient, run efficiently. Of course, it's a huge investment, and every other city in the province, Saskatchewan and Alberta, are asking for the same thing. No doubt about it. Everyone wants more hospitals because you want to try and solve this problem. So what we want is what's efficient. Yes, absolutely. Bring that forward to the provincial governments. But not only so, I'm very much in favor of, by encouraging those businesses to come to Lloyd with tax cuts and being a proactive council and so on, I'm very much in favor of preventative medicine. There is a clinic out of Calgary called the Harrison Healthcare Clinic. Now, they don't charge for insured services, right? But they are a private clinic insofar as if you want to pay a yearly or an annual cost, then you have access to, dietitians, you have access to personal RNs, you have access to CT scans or MRIs if you need them quickly. And this Harrison Healthcare Clinic exists to be preventative medicine. I think that's the best. Or not that I'm a doctor, but that certainly seems to me, after talking to doctors, to be one of the best, health steps you can take. Is far from trying to solve the problem when you're in the hospital with an issue. Let's try and solve it before. Let's be preventative. And so I'm very much in favor of trying to entice those private clinics and so on to start up in Lloydminster. And let's have some preventative health care. Let's talk about how we can stay healthy when we're young and into our elder age and so on. And so it's just that principle of, like you mentioned, trying to diversify Lloydminster's business and Lloydminster's services so that people have a higher quality of life overall.
Many user groups of the BioClean Aquatic Centre wish they had more accessibility to pool time and increased lanes, and length has been an issue too. And we're using a temporary space for our museum. We've moved the library to the Lloyd Mall, and a new event center is set to open in 2025.
Yeah.
What do you see as the next major recreational facility needed for our community, and can we pay for this without increasing taxes?
Yeah, well, so you go to economics, and the first principle you learn is the world's finite. We live in a scarce world, and there are trade-offs. If I buy 2 apples, I can't buy 2 oranges because I only have a certain sum of money. And I know you've heard this answer before, but it's true. Right now, the city is not in a position, I do not believe it is in an economic position to build a new center, right? The trade-off is the trade-off with the arena and with other services we provide is that we can't have, other recreational centers, at least right now. And so I am, like other candidates, yes, in favor of let's pay off the new arena first. Let's get that up and running. Let's figure out the books first. I'm very much in favor of cutting spending and cutting taxes, and then go from there. So although it's, perhaps not as popular as saying let's build a new pool, let's build this and that and the other thing, the numbers are hard. They do not budge. And so in this, I'm in favor of let's pay off everything first and then go from there.
Do you believe that would it be a pool though, Tanner?
Oh,
would that be?
I don't know. I think you'd have to talk to residents. To be honest, I actually don't swim, to be honest. I've never had but like you said, the pool is aging, sure. I don't quite know what it would be, to be honest. And I think that's an example where the council ought to go to the citizens and see what they want best. I have no say in the matter in that regard. If the citizens vote overwhelmingly in favor of a pool, and if the city had money and that was economically efficient, then why not a pool? Yes.
Do you believe that the city of Lloydminster mayor and council is transparent? What would you do to make them more transparent?
Well, yeah, I think most councils, all governments, federal, provincial or municipal, can always be more transparent. The books are, you can open the books. It's true. They provide they provide the financials online and so on, and I've read them and et cetera. But of course, they're complicated. So the CD Howe did a study. This is a good think tank. They did a study on fiscal transparency, and they looked at a variety of different cities across Canada. Now, they were larger cities, Vancouver and Brampton and Toronto and so on. Lloydminster wasn't included in the study, but the principles that they applied to successful fiscal transparency applied to Lloydminster too. Here's an example of them, or one of the principles. The CD Howe here said it would be best if the city, the cities, far from using what's called a cash accounting basis for capital projects and an accrual accounting basis for payroll and so on, just used one accounting system for everything, right? So far from saying we should use a cash style of accounting for capital projects and an accrual style of accounting for payroll, you should just consolidate that and use either accrual for all or cash for all. Now, I'm very much in favor of what's called an accrual style of accounting system because it's more transparent than cash. Accrual says, if you make a deal today to pay someone $200 million next year, right? That expense shows up on your books today. Whereas a cash style says it doesn't show up on your expense books today. It doesn't show up until you pay that $200 million next year. But that gives us, if that's the case, not quite as clear as it could be, financial picture of the state that the city's in, right? If you say you make the transaction today, and even if the payment is deferred, you still have an expense, so let's record it today, I think we're in a much clearer position, or we're able to see much more clearly what the books are like. Yes. So there are ways to increase transparency, very much so.
Do you believe that the decisions at council are made based on the information and recommendations provided by city administration, or do you believe influence from outside parties influence decision making?
Well, everyone's self-interested, council or not, right? Business members are self-interested. It should be more accurate. We say we're a self-interested society. We're actually a family-interested society, which is a good thing, right? I want to do what's best for my family. You want to do what's best for your family. And the businessman who's trying to get a contract from government wants to do what's best for his family as well. And so, yes, of course, council takes the recommendations of administration, but it wouldn't surprise me, and I'd be careful to say, or to not say, oh, absolutely, I have verifiable proof that the mayor or some council member has, got someone on his ear from living in Edmonton telling him exactly what to do, kind of thing. I wouldn't say that because I don't have proof of it or verifiable proof of it. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me at all if if individuals were trying to persuade council one way or the other. That would be expected, to be honest. You look at the way all governments work and businesses work. Of course, they'll have voices from every angle telling them what to do and what to spend on or what not to spend on, whether or not the council themselves, what advice they follow. That's a different story entirely. And I think you have to be very careful when you make claims like that. You need to have verifiable proof if you're convinced that, council is being influenced from outside and so on. So then, simplified, what I mean to say is, I have no doubt that voices are coming from outside council and administration to try and sway council's opinion and decision on certain things. Absolutely. That's the way politics works. That's normal. Whether or not the council is influenced to make such decisions in that manner, that would be up for each individual councillor to investigate.
Do you believe the city should invest in public transportation? Why or why not?
Well, so of course there was a feasibility study done on it. My answer now is no. And on page 15 of that feasibility study, which was done by Watts, I think, out of Calgary, they said, believe it or not, Lloydminster is not, as it stands, particularly conducive for a public transit system. And the reason is we're spread out. You know, we're a medium or a low to medium density city that isn't like Calgary, where we have a congested downtown where everybody works, right? We're different in that regard. And so because the city is medium density or low density, and because it's spread out, the efficiency of the public transportation is like dubious at best, right? Now, I know Cold Lake has a public transportation system.
They're very spread out.
Right, and they're very spread out. Now, it's also important to note that Cold Lake's transportation system has heavy subsidies from provincial governments, because economically you can't make a go of it on your own. Same with Fort Saskatchewan. Fort Saskatchewan's per rider rate, when all is said and done, is $26 a person, which is unbelievably expensive. And so, again, you have to look at the financials and look at the books. It's not particularly popular often, but as it stands, no. I think Border City Connects is and championing that and promoting that is far more efficient right now compared to the city implementing a new public transportation system. And it seems, I've talked to a lot of guys about it too, and I know, of course, there are both sides of the argument, but the men I've talked to seem to agree with that so far. Yeah, my platform is let's cut spending and cut taxes. Even though it might be unpopular, you have to do it at some point.
Thanks, Tanner. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will talk to another prospective candidate for City Council, that being Darrell Dunn. We'll be back in a moment.
At Lloydminster and District Co-op, membership matters more. Because being part of a co-op means you're connected to something bigger than yourself. From long-held legacy by those who built our communities, to people you call family, friends, and neighbors. When you're a Lloyd Co-op member, you're an owner in a local business that prides itself on purpose alongside profit. You earn cash back, you help support causes that matter most, and you're building a better way of life for the next generation. Membership matters more.
How can you help support the oil and gas industry and jobs in Western Canada? The answer is closer than you think. Sell your scrap metals to PWM Steel. PWM sells scrap iron to Evraz, located in Regina. Evraz's #1 customer is the energy sector, building pipes and plates for the oil and gas industry. PWM Steel is your locally owned metal recycler and steel service center in the area. Plus, they're a strong supporter of the community. PWM Steel, your top steel supplier for Alberta and Saskatchewan for 40 years.
At Jason Arden Associates Cooperators, we're proud to be a top-rated local insurance company that offers flexible solutions and expert advice for all your insurance and investment needs. We'll work with you to tailor your insurance specific to your needs, and we offer investment advice that always puts you first. At Cooperators, one of our core values is to give back to the communities that we live in. Thanks to the support of our clients in Lloydminster and area, in 2023, Jason Arden Associates has donated $40,000 to local nonprofits, charities, students, athletes, and other special events. How does your insurance company support our community?
It's more than just taxes at L&A CPA. Assurance, accounting, retirement planning, estate planning, business consulting, financial consulting, farm program support, and bookkeeping. But yes, there is always taxes. The team at L&A CPA is committed to helping you achieve your best results and will be there to assist you every step of the way. L&A CPA, with offices in Provost, Vermilion, and Lloydminster.
BioClean Disaster Services is committed, certified, and reliable and will help you get your life back. BioClean Disaster Services is Lloydminster's largest restoration company. They're also Lloydminster's local restoration company. 1-833-246-8326. You see their name on benches. You see them on the BioClean Aquatic Center. They are committed to this community and the surrounding area. So if fire, flood, disaster happens, you want a local company that's going to take care of you and take care of your family family and help you get your life back, you're looking for BioClean Disaster Services. 1-833-246-8326. Darrell Dunn is our next guest and the next contestant on Be a Candidate. We're excited to have him back. It's our it's your third go at this, isn't it, Darrell?
It is, yeah, the third for the Civic.
What keeps you coming back? What makes you want to represent City Council?
Well, the probably the most basic reason is the fact that I don't understand what retirement means, and my lovely wife Yvonne, if I don't get out of the house, I'm going to end up dead. So I have to do something. But it's my background. My parents were very involved politically over the years, and it soaked in. And my first kick at the can was applying for Texas Parliament as a high school kid, way back in the day. And so I've had political involvement all through my careers, and I've worked with government, I've worked for government, inside and outside of government. I've farmed, I've had businesses. I spent a decade with the police department in Calgary. So I've had a really broad range of experience, and we came here 15 years ago, originally on a 3-year agreement with her brother who owned Pinnacle Distribution. That turned into 15 years. And growing up in Western Canada, and I've traveled internationally a fair bit, I love it out here. This is you're 2.5 hours from two major cities. You have direct access to anything you want access to, and you don't have 1.5 million people living on your doorstep, but you've got all of the advantages. So that's a lifestyle that I think is worth preserving and growing and building. And we've got, of all the places I've lived over the years, this is probably one of the most community-minded, involved places that I've ever been. And
I like hearing that.
Yeah, and it makes it, it just makes it worthwhile being here and being a part of it. And I got started to get involved civically back in about, 2017. And I've been with, I'm with the Rotary. I've been with the Concerned Seniors, Snowflake House Foundation, which was a respite organization. And the more I got involved, it just, because of my political background, having worked in government, so on and so forth, having been around legislatures, having been around politicians, being able to gain access is as much art form as it is technical process. And so the issues came along, particularly with the seniors, and we were able to advocate. And that, at the end of the day, is the key. And one of the things that's kicking this out, if you can advocate using the platform of being a counselor, it gives you that much horsepower when you're dealing with Ottawa, when you're dealing with Edmonton, when you're dealing with Calgary.
Let's get into economic growth. How can council foster economic growth? Where do you see areas of success? What would you do to attract more diverse businesses to our community?
I enjoy that question because there's a couple of things that are involved here. Council, because of the mechanics of the question, economic development, council are champions. Council can do the rah-rah, the Barnum and Bailey, and champion what we have as a city. The technical elements of economic development, we've got a very good economic development group with the city. And as a community, we have a tremendous toolbox. We've got, what have we got? We've got the economic development department with Catlin. We've got Startup Lloydminster. We have Community Futures. We have something called eCarin, which is out of the Alberta Research Council in its origins, and it deals with the tech side of things. We've got BDC, we've got the Chamber of Commerce itself. All of these tools are there for startups, for businesses that want to grow, for businesses that want to expand. All of those things are available right here, right now, and I'm not sure that everybody knows about it. At the Chamber event the other night where you were recognized, I didn't realize that we had 1,800 businesses in this community. That's 1,800 businesses, so it's active. We also have what people in the economic development business call elephants. We obviously have an upgrader, we've got a refinery, we have a world-scale food plant. And years ago, when I worked with the province of Saskatchewan, Department of Agriculture, 1991, I traveled down to Decatur, Illinois, and met with 2 members of the Andreas family, which happened to be the folks that own Archer Daniels Midland. And we talked about this new thing that was happening in Saskatchewan at the time and Western Canada called canola. And what made canola such a big thing at that point, instead of sending it offshore, it was going into supermarket shelves. So it was direct retail end of the line for it. And you notice, X number of years later, we have Archer Daniels Midland, $1 billion plant in our city. Now, I am not saying that conversation resulted in that plant coming here. I am saying that part of the business as a consultant that I was involved in at that time was meeting with those groups and making them aware of what was going on in Saskatchewan in that circumstance. So those are the things that I know Catlin and her group are very busy doing that in conjunction with the other folks that we have around town. And it's an ongoing exercise. It never stops. It never stops. So you have both small business, you have the elephants, and you've got to chase them.
Homelessness is listed as our biggest concern as we head into out of the provincial election. Colleen Young was telling us she heard about it on the doorsteps.
Yeah.
What recommendations would you make to help solve the homelessness issue?
You're never going to solve the homeless issue. It goes back I go back to when I was walking the beat in uniform in Calgary, and we had exactly the same kinds of situations. And when you were walking the downtown area and you had a fair number of homeless there, it wasn't about enforcement. It was about presence and making sure that A, you knew what they were up to, but B, that they knew you were there. And it wasn't unusual in, say, a 40 below night where you were expected to do almost a head count on the homeless in your area to make sure that they were all alive in the morning. And we had the tools at that point, if we needed to. We could put them in the cells with no charges, just to make sure they were secure overnight. And then away they went in the morning. Could we do foot patrols here? I had coffee with the local RCMP just a few days ago, and that's not an unreasonable thing, because sitting with the folks on the east side of town, the Citizens Coalition, they're fed up. They're in serious shape over there in terms of what's going on and having to contend with the consequences of what's going on. So at the end of the day, I think very specifically we've got to look at where we can locate the shelter. Hopefully I'm getting together with Tegan in the next week or so to talk about that, because they're an independent organization. The city doesn't tell them what to do. This last deal has got to the point where the offer for the building was withdrawn, so that made that whole thing academic, but we've still got a situation we have to contend with. Whether it is the city's legislative problem or not isn't the issue. The consequences are here. So I think we have to draw together the police/security element. We have to take a look at where we can put a viable facility. We have to have the buy-in of the community and make sure that their needs and frustrations are addressed and recognized. The city, again, has some ability in terms of the land use bylaw and its permitting processes to have a hand in that exercise. And then obviously advocate to both provinces for it. But again, it's a management exercise. If the city can have a role in bringing people together towards a solution, then that's what we have to do.
I'm curious about the foot patrol. Would you push for the foot patrol? Is that something you'd push for?
I would.
Like, to me as a citizen, and if I was in that area, I would go, yeah, why don't we have constant patrol?
I would advocate for it because I've done it. I know what's involved in it. It's not about, as I say, it's not about enforcement. That may be an element of it. But at the same time, if you have boots on the ground that are walking or even bicycle, terrific. But one of the problems came to realize back in the day is when you get in that police car, they call them RCMP mounted for a reason. You don't like dismounting unless you've got a specific call to go to. If you're walking the beat, and it doesn't have to be all the time, it can be random. It can be several times a week or whatever. You get to know who's out there, and more importantly, they get to know that you're out there. And so it has a softening effect on what's going on. It just does. And that's why a lot of the big municipal forces at one point in the 70s you just didn't have beat walking anymore. They've all gone back to it.
So we kind of got into this, but crime is a huge concern both sides of the border. So how do you think council can develop and maintain a safe and viable community for everyone? And we've already kind of talked about that a little bit.
I only laugh
as a police officer, I guess crime was bound to come up. But
I had that conversation with an administration fellow this morning. And that's a file I very, very, very badly want to get my fingers into for obvious reasons. The boots on the ground, our RCMP guys and women are bending over backwards to do their job. The problem is not with the officers on the ground. The problem is with the system they operate within, and that involves both provinces and the feds. Give you a good example. The argument is, well, we got to spend more money and get more boots on the ground. We could spend $10 million or put it into a pot and say to the RCMP, okay, get us more guys. This is a force that has 19,000 people. This is a force that is supported by 11,000 non-member professionals. They put through 725 people a year through Depot. Now, that's no more than 3% of the 19,000. So when you have attrition and you're looking for more people in more places, the only two provinces in Canada that don't use the RCMP is Ontario and Quebec. And those decisions for staffing are not made locally. So where do you think those 725 people are going to end up? And this year, yesterday, we heard that we're going to get 2 more bodies in a detachment that is understaffed by at least 20%. The problem is not the RCMP on the ground. The problem is the system. Now, I would love to say that if we went to a municipal force, we could solve the problem. Calgary has they've sent people to the United Kingdom on recruiting. They just sent people to Halifax on a recruiting drive. One of the biggest differences in an organization like the Calgary PD and Edmonton is they are responsible directly to the local police commission. The RCMP, of course, goes up the line to Ottawa. So we have some structural issues as a city that we would like to deal with. I would like to know what's the potential of adding more bylaw. It's less expensive. They don't necessarily, bylaw guys don't investigate murders. They don't have to. That's why we have the RCMP. But if we're going to put some boots on the ground and basically walk the streets, there may be a role there. We've got peace officers. We have RCMP has an auxiliary that used to be a cheaper way of putting boots on the ground. One of them got shot here outside of Edmonton, 5 years ago. And that was a jolt for them. And they questioned why they should do that. So, one of the other things you have to look at in policing is where do you put your people and why do you put them there? You want your experts dealing with murders and the serious crimes. Your regular patrol stuff, that's a different business. You don't need that same level of expertise and background. So are we deploying our people as effectively as we can? I'm not suggesting that we're not. What I'm saying is I don't know, and it's something I'd like to find out.
Well, healthcare is a provincial responsibility. What do you see council? What role do you see council playing in order to make sure residents are getting the best care possible, as close to home as possible?
Interesting you bring that up. When I ran in 2020, I ended up getting involved with the Concerned Citizens for Seniors Healthcare. I truly do wish they would change their name. I just refer to them as the Concerned Citizens because the name is so long. But nonetheless, they've been, and Dr. Saeed was a founder of that organization, and they've been dealing primarily with seniors' concerns over the years. But it has expanded into an advocacy group that has gone beyond just seniors, because so many of these healthcare issues affect everybody. And it's easy to say we need a new hospital, and that's not really the deal. I remember back in the day, the Foothills Hospital in Calgary was built in 1966, a brand new hospital in 66. It's still expanding. So the issue in my mind is not whether or not we have a new building. The issue is whether we have a functional building and how many beds we have in that building. As you know, Yvonne broke her leg in June of 18 months ago. She sat in the hallway for 5 days. And I had just come off the provincial election at that point in time for the Alberta Party. And after 5 days, I kind of lost it and went political. And she got into a room that night. And
Was that here in Lloyd?
that was in University in
okay.
Edmonton. And
Okay.
the room was set up for 3, even though it was just a 2-bed room. And she finally, after 7 days, got into surgery. And it's a trauma hospital, so you can consistently get bumped. And the staff were absolutely amazing. The doctors were absolutely amazing. The problem was the number of surgeries that were going on and the availability of anesthesiologists. It wasn't the surgeons. And she finally got in on day 7 and got her surgery. And the fellow that did it, along with his anesthesiologist, that was a holiday weekend. That was a July long weekend. And he had been attending her throughout that period, and he said enough is enough. So this guy sacrificed his family time to get her surgery. Now, why? University Hospital in Edmonton handles 750,000 visits a year. Okay, that's just 750,000 people. They do upwards of 40,000 surgeries a year in that hospital. You divide that by 365. The problem with their healthcare system, whether it's Alberta or whether it's Saskatchewan, is supply and demand. The demand so far exceeds the supply of what we have that how do you manage that? Some of the doctors we were talking to are putting in anywhere from 80 to 120 hours a week. So that's some of the issues. But also, I mean, here locally, we've got actually a really interesting complex that we work with. As a result of the seniors, I've sat with Everett Hnidey a couple of times when he was health minister. We've sat with LaGrange. Gerald has had both health ministers here at the same time. The whole advocacy thing is critically important. The seniors have been developing a proposal for rebuild of Jubilee Home on the Saskatchewan side. We just received a letter from SHA bureaucracy saying that proposal is now in the pipeline. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll get granted this year. What it means is it's in the pipeline. That kind of advocacy goes on. And of course, you know, Steph Monroe with the foundation is busy at it. Paul Richer with his group is very busy at it. We've got some really good organizations here in town that work on constant advocacy with the ministers. And you just got to work it. You have to work it to death. It's really that simple. And council, again, with a platform of being a councillor, you have it gives you one extra lever to work with.
Many user groups of the BioClean Aquatic Center wish they had more accessibility to pool time, increased lanes and length. We're using a temporary space right now for our museum. The library is in the Lloyd Mall, and a new event center is going to open in 2025. What do you see as the next major recreational facility needed for our community, and can we pay for this without increasing taxes?
Don't you hate it when we pull up statistics? Okay. There's a young lady who's with the Stingray swimming group. She has lobbied me. This will be the third election now. She's constantly banging on me about when are we going to get a new pool. Well, I just found out yesterday, along with a number of people, because it's already hit our social media, that there's a new pool slated for, 2033. And the figure that they put down here is $150 million, and that's got a lot of people excited from the standpoint, that's a lot of money. But let's go to your question a little further. What about the library? What about museum? Service Sports Center had 127,000 visits last year. That's the usage in that place. Swimming, and I'm a swimmer, swimming had a total of 87,845 visits last year. What's the other big one here? The library, 90,000 visits last year.
I would say that's probably up.
Yeah. Well, you move it from a dungeon into where it is right now, and it's brighter, it's more open, it's easy access. I mean, that's what a library should be. Mm-hmm. So that's worked very, very well. The museum, a total of 5,100 visits is all. Now, to be fair, the museum, of course, the old building got condemned, basically. They moved to the new building. We were kind of in the midst of COVID, so on and so forth. So that number, if I recall correctly, an earlier number that I saw a number of years ago was that they had in the order of 13,000 visits annually. And students made up a reasonable proportion with this figure, and that comes from this report, the 2023 annual report. 1,100 of those visits were students. Weaver Park, and I am not, and I got the figure I'm about to give you from this one as well. I don't know how this figure was calculated, so I'm a little nervous about it. Weaver Park was 2,800 visits. And Weaver Park is looking at, over the next decade, something in the order of a $10 million upgrade and redevelopment. So one of the things I think that you do as a decision maker is look at some of these figures on the basis of needs versus wants and what we can afford. In the budget yesterday that came down, there's some considerable amount of paper devoted to showing our debt load, when it's going to go down, how it's going to go down, what's going to happen, so on and so forth. But there's a couple of principles of economics that are at play here. One, of course, is scarcity is resources. We've only got so much money that we can play with. And tax burden. I hate taxes, but I also understand that our taxes they're looking at going up 4% this year. That's outrageous. Really, when you consider that inflation last year was 3.8% and our taxes came in below that, inflation this year is looking at somewhere about 2.7, 2.8. So we've got to catch up from last year, and if carbon tax, $600,000 a year that we don't get back from the feds. My question is, where do you want to cut? It's not, I hate taxes. I hate the fact that it's gone up. But nonetheless, what services do we want to cut? And where do we want to cut? More realistically, when we look at these 10-year projections, when we look at the infrastructure gap, when we look at all of those things, anybody, in my opinion, that's on council had better be prepared to get into these numbers inside out and understand them, not just the numbers. What's the impact of going ahead or not? and you can look at this graph with these funny little figures and so on. They break it down into capital budget, what was asked for, what was approved, and what gets bumped. There's a lot of stuff gets bumped. The problem with that, and I understand it absolutely, but we also, with some of this stuff, have to pay for maintenance. And we've got two very old arenas here that, how long are we going to continue to put money into those for the hockey people? Okay, with two new ice surfaces there, and the ice surfaces we've got at Service. I mean, these questions, you have to ask them. And as a counselor, you had better be out there talking to people in Coffee Row, in places like this, in wherever you can get to talk to people to say, not just, what do you want? But okay, what's the consequence if we do that? And those are good questions. Now, just to finish off on the pool. Airdrie and Okotoks, I used to live in Okotoks, very familiar with Airdrie. Their swimming pool is also their library, is also their whatever you want. So they have done multiplexes. And with this figure coming out yesterday, the discussion on where we go with that starts in January. So we've got, we've got 9 years worth of planning and discussion and talking and so on and so forth. And the go, no-go point on that is numerous years down the road. So there's a lot of study has to be done. And I would hope that council's very much involved in it. And please go to the next question about transparency.
You bet. Okay. Do you believe the city of Lloydminster mayor and council is transparent? What would you do to make them more transparent?
There's two levels to that question. One is the view that somehow the city is hiding information, and that's purely ridiculous. Legislatively, they can't hide. It's against the law. The reality is there stuff that doesn't get announced? Is there stuff that doesn't get out there? That happens, certainly it happens. But let's talk about the budget for a minute. And again, people hate taxes. On this particular budget, there were 314 people out of 31,000 that responded to the survey put out in July and August. Now, that's an uptick from last year's survey, which had it had about 290 people that responded. Now, the city actually went out and had public conversations where they heard from over 500 people about the coming budget. And what you could do with that survey, you could check off if you wanted less spent in a particular area, if you wanted the same spent, or if you wanted more spent in a particular area because you thought it was important. And this public awareness, and as a media professional, I'm going to ask you the question, what do you think of this coverage? Social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. Radio advertising, Vista 106, Stingray 95.9, print advertising, The Bean, Morning News, Meridian Source, Utility Billing Mailer. Other media release, utility billing meter, bench ads, digital billboard, posters, May theaters. When you were watching a movie, you got an ad from the city about the budget. Pop-up survey stands, Lloydminster Public Library, city facilities. Then we've got earned media, we have newsletters, we have websites. So I put the question back to the average citizen. How much research have you actually done? I mean, it's easy to rant and rave over coffee, but did you do the survey? And I'm going to suggest to you with a response rate of 1%, the answer is probably not. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't like tax increases, but don't say that the information wasn't put out there. Having said that, a big part of a counselor's job is to listen. And I think there's a question here going to how much, when you make a decision, how much information comes from...
That's the next question, yeah.
comes from
City
administration
or outside influence.
or outside influence. And I think that's, with all due respect, my friend, that's the wrong question, because the answer is yes, both happen. You get information from the city, and, you know, I mean, you see this. Any counselor can do this research.
But
Any citizen can do this.
But Darrell,
research.
I wouldn't call a citizen an influence.
No, now,
Influence, I think, would mean a group.
let's talk about influence. I think it is fair to say that the fact that the new building for the shelter, that deal didn't go through because of outside influence. Local citizens were extraordinarily upset. And again, if you talk to those folks on the east side and put up with what they have to put up, they've got a park there that their kids can no longer play in because of what's going on in that park. Their influence in that had major impact.
So good influence in that case.
Well, influence, just from the
Depending
standpoint.
on which side of the
Yeah.
fence you're standing on.
And I mean, I sit on the assessment review board, looking at tax challenges. And sitting on there is like being a judge, because you have to listen to the evidence put down by both sides. And you have to make a decision not based on your personal bias. You don't have a personal bias. You can only make your decisions based on the evidence. The role of a counselor is not that different. You have to listen to what people in the community are saying. You have to hear what they're saying. You have to take a look at the facts and the figures and the information coming from administration, and you have to balance those out in terms of, okay, let's talk about the swimming pool. We've got 9 years to work on that project, and given the amount of money that's involved and the economic principle of opportunity costs, we've spent $110 million. That's $110 million we don't have to spend somewhere else right now. So that's got to be brought down. So you got all of these, you know, it's like a juggler on crack. You've got all of these issues that you have to work at the same time. And so you have to listen to all of the different voices and then make a decision.
Do you believe the city should invest in public transportation? Why or why not?
Absolutely, we should. Will we? And can we? First study that I had a look at was done, I think, in 2013, and it had a response rate of over 4,000 people in a community of this size, and it was a great study. I used to do them professionally back in the day, and it was well done. And the point is that the information that came back was valid. They just came out with the transportation master plan that touched on it here a short while ago. And that master plan looked at 4 different possible models of how it could be done. Now, sadly, we lost probably the best mind, not only in the city, but possibly in Western Canada, in terms of creative transportation. That was Glenn Fagnan. And Glenn and I had numerous conversations about this. City transportation is not a money maker, but is there a good argument to be made that it's necessary? Yeah. How do we do it? I don't think that's been determined yet. Not in a viable way. I think it's going to have to be creative. I think it's going to have to be a combination between city and private interest, and I don't quite know what that looks like yet. Having lost Glenn, that's a loss to that project, because it's going to slow it down.
But it sounds like you would be in favor of it somehow.
I would there's a whole range of user groups, including high school students, including college students, including new immigrants that don't necessarily have a license or aren't quite that far down the road. There's a whole bunch of user groups that could use it. So yeah, I mean, there's good argument to be made. The question is how, and how much money do we want to spend on it?
Thank you, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
We're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back with David Lopez.
At Diamond 7 Meats, we work with local farm families to provide a high-quality product and a great selection for you. Try our mouth-watering smokies, pulled pork, roast beef, and more, made pure and natural with no additives or fillers. We offer custom processing, and our experienced team works for you to provide a selection of sausage, burgers, and jerkies made to your specifications. Take your grilling to the next level with a Yoder smoker. Complete the grilling experience with a Canadian-made, award-winning line of House of Q barbecue sauces. We're locally owned and operated, and we look forward to seeing you today.
I'm Brian Zinchuk of PipelineOnline.ca. I used to be a pipeliner, and I've spent the last 15 years reporting on energy in Saskatchewan. PipelineOnline.ca provides comprehensive coverage of light oil, heavy oil, lithium, helium, power production including coal, wind, solar, geothermal, natural gas, and nuclear. There's a lot happening in Saskatchewan's energy sector, and Pipeline Online is there for all of it. No one else comes even close.
At CK McKean Roofing, they understand what it took to put that roof over your head for your family. With over 20 years of experience under their belt, they strive to show you that with their workmanship and their integrity. Not all roofing companies are created equal, and that's why CK McKean Roofing encourages you to focus on your most important investments, your home and your family. CK McKean Roofing. Roofers do it on top.
At Synergy Credit Union, we're more than just a financial institution. We're your partners in every step of your journey. From supporting local businesses to enhancing community life, we're committed to making a difference. Join us in shaping a brighter future. Together, we thrive, because this is Synergy.
Wellings of Lloydminster is an active 55 and over community for those with a busy lifestyle or those that want to start living maintenance-free because of their health. Either way, there's 66 units at Wellings of Lloydminster that have full kitchens, 5 appliances, walk-in showers, and in-suite laundry. And in this busy community, you get to know your neighbors with a gorgeous clubhouse and even a pickleball court. That's just for residents, of course. You can learn more by calling Darlene and taking a walk through one of their beautiful villas. 2-bedroom villas even have garages here in Lloydminster. So stop in and take a look at how deep those garages is. Or if you want to have a pet, you can have a pet as well. They call it Care Freedom Living. So that means maintenance free. It also means being able to travel without worry about what's happening to the big house. 780-872-8537. That's Wellings of Lloydminster. David Lopez is our guest. It's our first chance ever to have David Lopez on as a counselor. David has been with us before to talk about Bike for Breakfast.
Yeah.
But we didn't get him. We didn't get to do the counselors when there was the by-election. So it's great that you gave us some time, and thanks for being patient out there. We're running about
25 minutes.
We're running 25 minutes late here. So did you buy a vehicle? That's the question. Well, the goal was to have you come in, right, David, and make you wait and then buy a vehicle. So no, I'm just kidding. But it's we can go back to 8 months ago when you were running for this position that you currently have. And I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, why did you want to do it, David? And tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, I lived in Lloyd all my life. Well, not all my life. My parents moved here when I was 3 months old in 1976, and they bought the Lloydminster Motel that's on the corner where Arby's is right now. And we've set up shop there since, for 49 years now. And so grew up here, graduated from the comp, went off to, post-secondary education, tried the whole big city living. I lived in Edmonton, lived in Calgary, and I hated the big city. So I always knew I was going to come home. So my wife and I, Michelle, we moved back in 2000, and I've been working and running in the family business since then. And I've always loved politics, right? I've been a card-holding member of the Conservative Party since I was 18 years old. I've voted in every single municipal, provincial, federal election since that time. And I knew I was always going to do this. It was finding the right time. And now with the boys both being in university, it was time. It was time to get back in there. The by-election was just one of those things, frustrated with the spending, frustrated with, things that were happening in the city and seeing that the taxes were going up and just not understanding, do they understand what they're doing to the business community when they do these, tax increases and things like that? And really understanding, I've been watching council meetings for 2 years. right? Since the pandemic and things like that, I really I got focused in on it. And Aaron Buckingham, who was a counselor at the time, he did some contract work for me, and we would sit down and we would discuss what happened in council, and I'd be like, hey, like, have you guys thought of this? Have you thought of that? And I felt it was time to put my voice forward, and just to I'm not saying I'm right and not saying that I have all the right answers. I figured they needed a voice of a business person from the business community to sort of level off what council was doing. So I was frustrated, and I said, I'm gonna run. So ran in February, won, 8 months in, still love the job. My parents, and we're busy. We've got multiple companies. We're busy. We're small business, and my parents are always sitting there going, like, you just love this, don't you, David? And I'm like, I love it. I absolutely love being in politics. I love meeting with people. I love talking to people. I love being able to go to the SUMA meetings that were in Regina and talking to other communities and saying, hey, we've got this issue, you've got this issue. How are you working on trying to fix it? And the biggest one that happens right now is the homeless issue. Mm-hmm. And the answer you get from everyone is, when you figure it out, let us know. Right? Because everyone has that same problem. So again, I'm talking a lot, but I love being able to talk to other communities, talk to other businesses, talk to other people, and say, like, I don't have the answer. What's your answer, right? And seeing if there's a collaboration or if there's something that's going to work that would work for Lloydminster. I'm not that guy who thinks we have to reinvent the wheel, right? The solutions are out there. It's finding the one that works in this community and implementing it.
Was there anything, David, like 8 months ago that when you joined council and you're like, I want this to be from a businessman's perspective, did you find, they already were? Or did you find, what, maybe there was stuff that they weren't thinking of from your standpoint?
From my standpoint, I honestly believe I've brought more questions to council. I've brought them to, I've put them to task on some things, and brought a different light to it. The one thing that I did really run on and was frustrated with was the maintenance shop that they wanted to put at the golf course, and thinking that we don't need a $2 million maintenance shop for a community service that companies in Lloydminster wouldn't even have. So why do the city staff feel that they need something that's better and more elaborate than what we would have as business owners? So just bringing that into perspective, and just sitting there saying, this, like, if it's what you need, it's what you need. But if it's what you want, well, then you're only going to get what you need, right? Because in the business world, we always want bigger, better, fancier, but we always settle to what we need.
What did you find? Like, what did you find? That it was $2 million was the price tag for?
Well, you know what? It was $2 million. There was, and I'm not blaming anyone or anything like that, but I went for a tour of the maintenance shop, and they kept on saying it was like for like. Being in construction, I walked into it, I'm going, okay, it is old, it's got some issues, things like that. But I'm walking around and I'm like, this is not a 6,000 square foot maintenance shop. This is not like for like. So being who I am, I went the next day with my 100-foot tape measure and I measured the size of the shop. And it wasn't 6,000 square feet. The maintenance shop was 4,000 square feet. So then I went back to administration. I said, listen, like, who's wrong here? Because we only have 4,000 square feet. We're not building like for like. We're building something that's 50% bigger. And they sort of went and it said, well, you know what? There was maybe some misunderstanding. We didn't understand what was drawn to compared to what was there. And I feel, I feel as administration, sometimes you have to know what you're getting yourself into. And when you're talking to council, you have to make sure you're given the correct information. I'm not saying that they were lying. I'm just saying that they were unaware. So, so I was able to bring it back, and as council, we voted against putting in that maintenance shop. Not saying that they don't need one. I'm just, again, it's let's build something that makes sense, right? We don't need 6,000 square feet to have, a larger staff area than we do have a maintenance shop in there. So those are the kind of things that I look at. And, even, when we get into the land use bylaw and things like that, reading into the land use bylaw, again, because I have a construction company, looking into it, reading it and going, man, you know what? I really don't like how in the low density we're allowing single family homes and duplexes as permitted. And at the time you could put up to 4 units on a single lot. And I just kept bringing it back. I'm going, as a discretionary, I kept bringing it back. I said, guys, we don't want to give people this option. We don't want people to be able to have an empty lot in College Park or Parkview that's been there sitting empty and having someone be able to draw something up that they could put 4 units on there as a discretionary.
I don't want this in my neighborhood,
Yeah.
so why would we allow somebody to do it in a different neighborhood?
Exactly. And look, I'm the construction guy. I should love this. I said, because now I've taken the size of a lot that's $150,000 and I've split it over 4 units. So like my cost per door gets less. And I go, so I don't like this. So I kept on fighting it and arguing it. And I said, this is wrong. We've built subdivisions the same way for years, where you start on the outside, you put the multifamily, the apartments, the condos, things like that. And then as you move in, you get to entry-level homes. And as you get further inside, you get into the more, luxurious upper-end elaborate homes. I said, there's nothing wrong with that. I go, and we're not short on land. So I didn't understand why we needed to do it right now. So I pushed on it, I pushed hard, and maybe, some people think I pushed too hard. I don't think I did. I think
Isn't that what the federal government wants, though, David? Like, don't they want more?
Again,
maybe we shouldn't go there.
Well, you know what? I don't care what the federal government wants. I care about what Lloydminster wants and what Lloydminster needs.
Exactly.
Right?
That's
and
kind of what I was.
And I don't feel that the federal government's pushing it on us. There's lots of people that sitting there going, they're doing this because they want the and I'm forgetting the name of the grant, right? I
know exactly what you're talking about.
Sorry, I apologize.
I can't remember. But again, I know what you're talking about.
You know what? The way
Edmonton
we
just got it, right?
Yeah, right. The way we had it set out, we wouldn't have qualified for the grant anyways. So I honestly believe, like the land use bylaw, living document, right? It can be changed. It can be changed as we need it. Right now we have lots of land. We have multifamily home empty lots that can be built on. We have land for starter homes. We have land for, upper end homes. So we have the land. So why are we pushing things that we don't need because we're not landlocked? We're not Toronto. We're not Vancouver. We're not Edmonton. We're not Calgary that are sprawling so big that it's getting too expensive to build, to run these cities. That being said, if we want to keep sprawling and everybody wants single family homes, a single family home, someone who has one has to be willing to pay the taxes to cover the costs that it's going to take for the city to run, to do the snow removal, to get the garbage, to do the parks, all those kinds of things. So we have to, there has to be that balance, right? I'm that guy. I'm not a house guy. We had a house because we have kids. We're actually looking at moving back into the condo, right? But that's my choice. I don't want that choice to be for you. I don't want that choice to be pushed onto anybody else. I'm choosing that for myself. And I really believe we have to, as a community, have our own choices, right? And we have to be willing to pay for it. Those are the things that we have to understand. If you want this, it's going to cost you X as a household. You have to be willing to pay for that. If you don't, if you want this, but you can't afford this, well, then we have to move back and be back, like when our parents grew up, and I always talk to my dad back in the 70s and the 80s. When he built his first house, he built the house. And then a few years later, he put the driveway in. And then maybe a few years later than that, they put the detached garage on. They didn't do it all at once. And as a community, we feel like, my generation, we feel like we need to have everything right now. So if we want it all right now, we have to be able to pay for it all right now. And that's where, as a community, we have to get to, is understanding those things.
I think we're going to come back to a lot of this discussion.
Those aren't on the questions you were asking.
No, but a lot of them pertain to. Yeah. So I think we're going to come back to a lot of those.
Yeah.
Let's start with fostering economic growth. This is something that you obviously felt passionate about.
Absolutely.
Being business owners here in Lloydminster, where do you see areas of success, and what would you do to attract more diverse businesses to our community?
So I think in success, look, we got this new, brand new Lloydminster Nissan building. These are areas of success. We are growing, in putting up new buildings. And again, it's a local business that's outgrown their old spot, growing into a new one. Where we need to work on is we're that forgotten child by Alberta and Saskatchewan. We, and the mayor does a great job of promoting us. And he's like, we had a meeting with Scott Moe at the oil show, and sitting there saying, we have 7 industrial lots on the Saskatchewan side ready to go, fully serviced. We have rail, we have highways, we have water, we have everything that any industrial company would want. But we're always forgotten to be brought to the table. So when they're looking for industry and they're going out and trying to attract people to Saskatchewan, they forget about Lloydminster. And we really pushed them and said, you have to remember to put Lloydminster on the map. You have to remember we are here, we have these industries. It can't just be Regina, Saskatoon, Moose Jaw. Right? The communities, we're getting close to being, like, if you put the whole population of Lloydminster, we're probably the 3rd largest city in all of Saskatchewan. So why are we being forgotten, right? So we have those lots. We need to, we need to get there. We need to promote them. I feel when we go to municipal meetings and things like that, we're really pushing the Lloydminster agenda. We're really pushing the things that we need from, whenever, like at the Saskatchewan urban municipality, one of us is always there talking to the ministers and saying, hey, don't forget about Lloydminster. This is what we have. These are the things we have. We have everything that any executive that would start a company in Lloydminster would want for their family here, from the library to the museum to a golf course to the facilities for the arenas to, soccer, basketball. Like, these are the things that people look for. We have the Vic Juba Theatre that, these executives are looking for their family. So we maybe have to do a bit better job promoting ourselves, but we have to keep pushing those governments to say, don't forget about us.
Is it, or do you think we're forgotten about in Alberta and Saskatchewan because it's like, I don't want to help Saskatchewan, I'll be helping Saskatchewan if I put this here. I'll be giving economic growth to Alberta if I'm putting it here. I need to focus on Saskatchewan. Like, is it like we forgot about you, but we didn't forget
I don't think it's intentional. I think they just, they see Lloydminster and they're going, oh, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan's got them, right? They're dealing with Saskatchewan. You go to the Alberta side and they're like, well, you know what? Yeah, or the Saskatchewan, they go, well, they got more population. Alberta. Alberta's got them. They'll help them out with these things, and we kind of get forgot, And it's one of those things, and I think the mayor has talked to you about that. Like, we're underfunded on the Saskatchewan side for the RCMP.
Yep.
Right, and why is that? Right, and
apparently it was a decision made years ago, David. It was a decision made.
F and K division. I can't remember which one's F. If F is Alberta and K is Alberta.
When we decided to go to such a division.
Yeah, because we moved it on to the Alberta side.
It was our choice to go with less police officers.
Well, I don't know if it was our choice. I think
that's what it sounds like when you talk to our MLA.
Yeah, well, and I don't know. I wasn't around at the time, so I can't answer that one as well. But we pushed that onto Scott Moe as well when he was here at the Heavy Oil Show. We're saying, like, we're underfunded. We're underfunded by over $400,000 on RCMP here in Lloydminster for the officers. So those are things that we push to them, and I honestly, being a part of it now, I see how much the mayor and council pushes on both governments.
You wouldn't have saw that before.
You knew it happened. You didn't realize how much it was happening.
Okay.
Right? And that's a positive. That's a very positive that I find with council. And it's the same thing with Alberta. We're always pushing, with Rick McIver and those guys to get us, at the table. Like, we can provide, like, we've got the lots, we've got the commercial, we're lucky. We've got that rail system, and we've got 2 highways that we can utilize. So it's just getting Lloydminster to the table and keep pushing on them to get Lloydminster to that table. and understand every time we do something, you know, if we want healthcare or we want any of this stuff, we have to do it twice. Every other city only has to deal with one province. We have to do it with Alberta, and we have to do it with Saskatchewan. It takes twice as much time to do all these things here.
Homelessness is listed as a big concern by many residents. Our MLA said when she knocked on doors, this is the number one thing for her, is homelessness that she's hearing about. What recommendations would you make to help solve this issue?
And
you kind of said, if you solve it, let us know.
That's right. And, you know, I talked to Wetaskiwin, and we talked to Edmonton, and we've talked to, you know, communities in Saskatchewan as well. And it's like, what are you guys doing? How are you guys doing that? And like Wetaskiwin's hired it out to a third party, and I think it's the Mustard Seed or Braille Street. One of them is and they actually donated the land right beside the Walmart on the outside of town, and they're building the facility, and it's going to be a full homeless shelter with resources and services like that. And their community hates that, right? Because so it doesn't matter what you do. You take a look at what happened in Edmonton, and you've got these encampments.
I was just thinking, I don't think I'd like that. I was just thinking to myself.
Exactly. So in Edmonton, you've got these encampments. I don't know if you watched on the news that elaborate encampment that there was
solar panels?
Solar panels and a generator and a welder.
Dug into the ground, yeah.
So, and 7 people were there. They offered them services and supports, and all of them turned it down. How do you stop that?
Why don't you just go get a job?
Well,
you're obviously smart.
Oh, absolutely.
So I was watching that too, and I was thinking to myself, like, obviously these people don't want to work. They're happy in what they're doing.
But
because they're smart enough to do it. They're constantly working.
They're working all the time, right? So how do you stop those guys, right? Like, there's a level of society that doesn't want to be in a house, right? They want to be these nomads type thing that live off the grid, and so I don't know how you stop that. You know, and it's that whole thing. I know the men's shelter is always being harped on that, but they're not the homeless problem. The men's shelter is a place where, and I think Kagan's getting it back to there, where if you are like, and people fall on hard times. Like, if you fell on hard times, you know, this is a place where you can stay, get back on your feet to the point where you can get an apartment again and get your life back together. So, you know, I think at that point in time, they were trying to be everything to everybody, and they caused a bigger problem around that area than needed to be. But I'm honestly, like, as a city, I think for places like that and the Olive Tree, and you've got residents in recovery, you have to take the resources to where they need to go, right? So the men's shelter has to be the men's shelter. If you're hungry, you're not going to the men's shelter to get food. You're going to go to the Olive Tree, and the Olive Tree will be there, and they can offer you a meal, and they can also sit there and say, what do you need for help, right? Do you need like a social worker? Do you need to talk to someone? Are you falling on hard times? Could be coming homeless, and they have the home-based system, which is one of those things that as a council, we actually gave a grant to the Olive Tree to hire a social worker to help out with that home base. And they've actually added more people into homes doing that. So as a city, we got to keep our fingers out of it. We have to be able to support them, and we have to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I always say it's the good neighbor policy, right? You have to be a good neighbor. So the men's shelter, you've got to be a good neighbor. You've got to keep your lot clean. You've got to keep your area clean. Your tenants that are there have to be good tenants. So if you've got and it's no different than when I rent an apartment or a condo, right? My tenant is responsible for anyone that shows up in that facility or around that facility. So the same thing with that men's shelter. If you've got a tenant and they're bringing derelict or criminals around there, you threaten them, you sit there and say, they keep coming around, you're out, right? We're going to only support people that want to be good neighbors and do things like that. So I'm a big believer in that. I think we need to support them where we can. I don't think we need to get involved in them. I honestly believe that we put the policies around and we make sure that they follow them. But for me to sit there and say, I want to open up a men's shelter, I want to be responsible for a men's shelter as council or as a homeless shelter, I don't want that. That's not staying in our lane.
Crime is a concern, both Alberta and Saskatchewan. We've mentioned it already, being underfunded. How do you think council can develop and maintain a safe and viable community for everyone?
Again, it's we've got that catch and release policy that the federal government has put down. You know, you can be committing a crime this morning, and you're back on the streets in the afternoon committing another crime. It's we've really handcuffed our officers as to what they can, what they can and cannot do. So, with that being said, we do have a couple of new officers that have been put into the budget. So we are putting more boots on the ground, and listening to the RCMP speak. The biggest problem that we have, and I'm at fault for this as well, is we're not reporting the crimes. So when a crime happens, it's not being reported to the RCMP. And I fell on that. I've got a building downtown, had the window smashed out, and I never called the RCMP and let them know about it, right? So that wasn't an incident that was recorded.
Before or after you're on council?
It was before I was on council.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, and right. So again, why didn't I report it, right? Because I had that analogy. They're not going to do anything about it anyways.
Right.
But now being on council, it's like, well, now they don't have the reporting to justify having more people in that area, right? So, it's reporting it, letting the RCMP know what's going on. And if there is a hotspot because there's more crime or more vandalism happening in one spot, I honestly believe, and the RCMP would tell you the same thing, they're going to go and do more patrols in that area. So it's not, it's adding more RCMP, getting more boots on the ground, having them walking around, and I feel they're doing a better job of this, understanding who is in this community, who's living in those encampments and things like that, and making sure they know them by name, right? The RCMP officers know these people by name and know tracking what they're doing.
So I think healthcare was a major issue 8 months ago when we were running. It seemed to come up from every council member. And I'd always say, it's a provincial responsibility. It is a provincial responsibility.
100%.
But what role do you see council playing in order to ensure residents are getting the best care possible, as close to home as possible?
Advocate. We have to advocate and keep advocating. It's always the talk of the new hospital. So Red Deer just got a new hospital. It was over $1 billion for a hospital. So not saying that we would get the same size hospital as Red Deer, but these facilities are expensive. Does Lloydminster need one? Absolutely. Do we push it every time we get in front of the health ministers? 100%. For every time we get in front of them, it's like, we have a hospital that was built for a population of 15,000 people. We are now over 30,000 people just in our population, and we have a draw of over 190,000 people that come to Lloydminster for their healthcare services, and we're running out of this hospital. The hospital's, it's got issues. It's got a parking lot that needs. I think it got paved now.
It did, yep.
Right, but those were COVID dollars from 2020 that were supposed to pay for that hospital parking lot, and it got done in 2024. That's how slow this system works. So there are issues in the hospital that aren't getting fixed. It's two provinces. So we brought both health ministers to Lloydminster in June, had them both sitting at the same table and sitting there saying, here's our problem. And it was amazing to find out, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we need to get together more and figure out what's going on to Lloydminster. They forget about Lloydminster. They forget about the healthcare system that's in Lloydminster, and we aren't getting our fair shake. We're not getting anywhere near our fair shake for the type of hospital we have, the type of services we have. When we have the Region Health Foundation going and buying equipment for our hospital, that should be the provincial government's buying it, it's fallen off the radar. So we've fallen off that radar. And I'm telling you right now, we advocate. We're pushing all the time. It was... And again, I sit there and I go, I'm watching at the Saskatchewan municipalities and at Alberta municipalities, and I'm watching our mayor and our other councillors just hammering on the ministers and hammering on the ministers and hammering on Colleen, saying, hey, we need these things. Why are we being forgotten? For beds, why does Maidstone have more beds per capita than Lloydminster, right? For the Pioneer Lodge and things like that. Why does North Battleford have more beds than Lloydminster? Why are we being forgotten? And it's just advocating. And I think not only as us as a council do we have to go and advocate for this, but as a community we have to get cranky, and we have to start pushing on both governments and start calling our MLAs and our MPs and saying, hey, we're being forgotten. Why are you not doing this? Why aren't we getting this? And remembering that Lloydminster's a community and we all have to push for the same thing. So it's fine and dandy that there's 7 of us that push when we're at council meeting or at these meetings, but as a community of 35,000, if we were hammering on these governments all the time and sort of being the jerk in the room, I think we'd be able to get, we'd be able to maybe push some of these agendas a little bit further.
Many user groups of the BioClean Aquatic Center wish they had more accessibility to pool time and increased lanes, and length has become an issue as well for a lot of swimmers. We're using a temporary space for our museum. We've moved the library to the Lloyd Mall, and the new event center is set to open in 2025. What do you see as the next major recreational facility needed for our community, and can we pay for this without raising taxes? And we raised taxes yesterday.
We definitely can't do it without raising taxes. You know what? The new pool is on the 10-year agenda, on the 10-year budget, sorry. And it's, how do you say it? It's budgeted at $150 million in today's dollars. So if we look at doing it in 8 years or 9 years or was in 2035, so where are we then? Are we 300 million? Are we 280 million?
My guess is yes.
Those are big numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we don't need a new pool. I'm just, how do we pay for it, right? Right now, like, our debt's high, you know, and we just had the budget yesterday, and they show that the debt starts dropping here after 2026, and we've got a couple of facilities, like the Russ Robertson, that's going to be off the books by 2026, and there was another one, I just can't remember what it is. And then the RCMP station and the Ops Center are off the books by 2030. So those are 3 big facilities that we've now are off our books. But with that being said, the Service Sports Center is 20 years old. The Ops Center will be hitting that 15-year mark. The RCMP station will be needing renovations. If we keep growing as a city, we're running out of space at City Hall. So, like, there's always something that needs to be done. We're always going to be borrowing money or trying to. And do we borrow money or do we do it through taxes? Either way, the taxes go up, right? So, do we need a new pool? I don't use it, but I'm going to say yes. With that being said, you look at the University of Alberta and they're canceling their swimming program. You look at other universities and things like that, they're all canceling their swimming programs just because they're too expensive to run. So again, it's fine to have the facility. What's it going to cost me to run? And that's the big thing with that I keep saying with the Synovus Energy Hub is, what's this going to cost me to run? Right? Give me some numbers. Give me some hard numbers. And they've got some rough numbers, but it scares me that what this facility is going to cost to run, and especially if we can't get events to come. So again, time will tell. It'll take a couple of years to figure out where we are financially, but it's one of those things. How much is too much for taxes? And I honestly believe we're getting to that point where we're losing families and we're losing businesses because of where our taxes are.
Do you believe that as a council member, the city has been transparent? And is there anything more that could be done to make the city more transparent? I feel like honestly, this is maybe a conversation we had before.
Honestly, yeah, I believe it is transparent. I think we had all the council meetings are live. They're recorded. You can read the budget or the packages before they come out. Again, how many Your Voices does the city put on that nobody shows up for? So as me, as a citizen, I bet you I've been to 90% of the Your Voices. And there was ones that...
Before you were a councillor?
Before I was councillor. Oh, absolutely. I want to know what's going on in the city. I love politics. I love doing these things. And I would go to some of these Your Voices, and there'd be the same 5 people there. right? So the city's put all this overtime into the staffing. They've posted it all over social media. They've put it in the newspaper, everything. And then 5 people show up. And then when something happens, it's like, well, no one told us. And I'm frustrated because as citizens, when is it our responsibility to start looking as to when things are happening, right? When we want to, I'm a huge Oilers fan, right? When I want to find out when the Oilers are playing or what the schedule's like, I go look for it. Well, it's no different in municipal politics, right? In the municipal government. If you want to know what's going on, you can go to the city website. You can call the mayor. You can call a councillor. You can sit and say, hey, I want to know when X is going to be talked about next time. And they'll let you know, right? So I was always that guy. I'm like, you know, the land use bylaw thing, these things that I figured out before I got the binder with all the paperwork. It was going to the Your Voices and being engaged and being an engaged citizen and looking for these things. So do I think they're transparent? Yes. Can they do things differently? Sure. I don't know what it is. One of the things that was brought up is maybe putting in a flyer in the water bill with upcoming events.
I heard that at the land use bylaw.
Yeah. So that's a suggestion, and you know, it's another medium that the city can look at putting in. But
half the people in the city would also go, why are we still using paper for our
I don't
water
get mine
bills?
as a paper bill.
You don't?
I don't think so.
Well, mine comes as a paper bill, and I don't know
Maybe
if I've
I'm
seen
wrong.
an option on how to.
I don't know. My wife pays the bill, so I.
That's not, maybe your wife should be on city council, David. That's what people are going to be saying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm trying to think for the companies. Yeah, honestly, I'll have to look at that.
Sounds like it might be overdue. You better.
Yeah, that's right. No, they would have shut it off by now, trust me.
Yeah.
So,
when making decisions, do you base your answers on the information and recommendation of the city administration only, or are there outside parties that may try and sometimes do influence council decisions?
what outside parties? Because is an outside party, like I'm talking to Kurt Price and he's saying, hey, like, you know, with Canada Day, I think it should be more at Weaver Park than it should be at Bud Miller. Is that an outside influence? And then we go into administration saying, hey, have you guys ever thought about maybe doing like this? Or is an outside influence, are we going all the way like federal government, like you don't get this, the home equity grant or funding if you don't do this? Because I don't believe we're there. I do believe that as council and as administration.
Well, we had someone running for council, David, just so you know. We had somebody running for council say the outside influence was foreign investors, foreign money.
No.
So so when we're looking at influence, we could be looking at influence from citizens, we could be looking at influence from business, and then it was brought up foreign interference, sort of.
Yeah, I don't think there's any foreign interference.
Or foreign dollars.
Foreign dollars.
Into our city, into...
Husky was a foreign company. We have companies that have headquarters out of Canada that are situated here. Does that mean that they're giving us foreign influence? I don't think so. I think we're as a council and as administration, I think it's our duty to talk to the community, talk to business people, talk to developers, and find out what they're seeing out there. Because me as a counselor and running a restaurant and running construction, I know nothing about oil and gas. I know nothing about the car industry. Like I know how to put gas in my truck, right? Like, so
well, that's two of us,
right? So I'm not going to give you opinions on what kind of an industry can come in that can use rail. Like I was using the whole rail situation. I'm not that guy. I can advocate and tell you how great Lloydminster is and how great our services are and how but I'm not going to advocate and tell you, hey, this is a better spot than this, and these are the things that we need. We need outside influences from industry for things like that, totally. But do they influence us? Day to day, no. But do they influence our decision making? To a point, I would say yes. When we create a subdivision or the developer goes and creates a subdivision out there, they've got a vision. They've went to other communities. They've seen what works out there, and said, hey, we're going to bring this here. Now, does it fall in? Does it work with your master development plan? or not. Like, let's find out and then see how we can make this subdivision or this area work. You know, like the Cornerstone wasn't a Lloydminster made like strip mall. That was a plan and an idea that was brought in from somewhere else, came to Lloydminster, said, hey, we want to put this Walmart, Canadian Tire, like Sobeys, all this stuff in here. This is sort of the vision we have. Can we make this work in Lloydminster? Well, is that an outside influence? I would say it is, but is it a great did it work good for our community? Absolutely it did. I don't think we have negative outside influences that are trying to squish the little guy, right? I honestly believe city and administration is looking for the betterment of the city. Do they make all the right decisions? No. Do we ask all the right the questions? No. And that's why we need to talk to people who know more than, like, I can't know everything about everything. So I have to go and ask people about things. If I needed to know about podcasting, I'm going to go ask you, right? I'm not going to go and ask, you know, someone that's got another restaurant. So those are outside influences, and I believe that we need to use those resources to make sure that what we're doing is for the betterment of the community. I don't believe we're not trying to destroy Lloydminster. We all live here. We all love it here. We're not trying to destroy it. Like I don't believe there's an outside influence that's bringing money in from foreign investing to Lloydminster.
Do you believe this city should invest in public transportation? Why or why not?
Yes and no. I think there
what
has
a
to
politician.
Be... Yeah. I honestly believe that we need to look at a Lloydminster made something that works. And we've got like Border City Connects. And I think we can utilize resources like that. I believe we need to put in, you know, like rideshare, like an Uber and a Lyft, things like that. We need to add those kind of resources and vehicles here as well. If you tell me that we need to buy buses and have bus stops, I'm going to say no. And the only reason I say that is you take a look at Moose Jaw and they're selling their buses, right? It's basically been a failure. You look at Cold Lake. Cold Lake is spread out like their landmass is way bigger than ours.
At one time, there were two cities.
Exactly, right? And you take a look at them, and you know, and I brought this up when they were doing the transportation master plan, and I said they get like 12 riders an hour. And the consultant that the city brought in says, well, I find that to be a success. And I'm like, I find that to be a failure, right? And then you look at Grand Prairie, and Grand Prairie, again, another community that's bigger than ours, that's struggling and is sort of shutting down their transit system. So again, I don't need to be the guinea pig. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. But I think there needs to be something, and if it's Border City Connects with some ride sharing, with some taxi services, things like that, I think we can make a model that works for Lloydminster. But to put in a transit system that, you know, and when we were looking at that transportation master plan, you could be walking up to 500 meters. Like that's half a kilometer to get to a bus stop, to get to a loop that would get you to, you know, it would get you close to Walmart, it would get you close to Sobeys, or it would get you close to Superstore, but it wouldn't get you to the front door. And then you've got your groceries, then you got to walk another 250 meters or 300 meters to get back on that bus to go on a loop. And again, it just doesn't seem like it's the right system for us. So yes, we need something, but I think it has to be. Again, we have smart people in this community that run the Border City Connects, that run the taxis and things like that, that we can get together with, find something that's Lloydminster made, that's going to be cheaper to run.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting for us today.
No worries.
We'll be back next week. We have more potential city council candidates coming on the show next week, and we're also going to be talking about Remembrance Day. We have a lady in our area who has been honored by the RCMP. I've been trying to talk her into coming on the program. I think I've got her scheduled for Monday, but we'll find out for sure. We will be back with you Monday morning at 10 a.m.